What's up there, workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and Brian and I are here to talk about housing in Final Fantasy XIV. Brian, we have some housing news.
There is some news that's happening, breaking live news on the Lodestone, talking about additional plots coming to the residential areas, essentially for all of them, which is going to be adding a lot more plots for everybody to be able to get their hands on. What's really cool about this is that, at least in my opinion, that they're opening it up to just free companies at first. So this is going to hopefully allow a lot of free companies be able to jump in and get access. But that's also a part of the conversation here today, because we know housing is this continual pain point for a lot of people, especially if you haven't been in the game as long as, like we have in that regards, right? We have a house. We've been there for a long time, but there's a lot of people who still can't find housing warrants. Chris, do you want to read what the full details are?
To just get this out in front, this is after the release of 5.1, wards 19, 20, and 21 will be added to all residential districts. Subdivisions will also be available, resulting in a total of 180 new plots for each of the 4 districts. Guys, that's 720 plots. So in the past, I think you guys have seen me be critical of like when they just add like a small number, or when we accuse like a few people of double plotting, it being the problem. 720 is pretty substantial, especially for smaller servers. And then there will be an apartment building also added to each ward, with a second apartment building available in each subdivision. Please note that the sales of plots 19 through 21 will be restricted to free companies for a limited time. We will evaluate the housing market and decide when to remove the restriction on sales to individuals, and individuals may still purchase plots in wards 1 through 18, and players may still relocate any private or free company estates they presently own. So this is really exciting. Brian, I'm hoping 720 is enough. I think for some of the
It's never going to be enough.
it won't be, because it's still a band-aid to a long-term problem.
Right. I've always really appreciated what they did with housing at first, because like when back in ARR, when it was first introduced, like I remember watching the live letters and them going through, and the concept of the neighborhood, and that you could see your neighbors, and I thought that was just magnificent. And then in I guess like reality and how it ended up going about is that there's limited space. It's a commodity. It's this really like desired thing, and so players have had to kind of skirt the issue. We've heard now, because of the kind of how they've randomized it, because there's always these land rushes when this happens, that people would take time off work and then they'd get in queue, and then, they'd have all the money because they want to get the perfect plot, and then they wouldn't be able to have access to it. So for me, from like, I think it was patch 2.3 or sometime around that, like it's been a while, from that point to now, I've gone 180 degrees. I'm just like, can we just give people an instance option from individuals and leave the neighborhood option 100% free company? And it's kind of like too late, because it's the system it is. How do you go and start evicting individuals? Ultimately, it seems like just a lot for me personally of unneeded drama and frustration for people who want to engage in this content. And the argument, and I'd love to know your thoughts as well as everybody's thoughts in the comments below, the argument I also hear is that it's optional content. And then for some people, we'll counter that and saying, for some people it's optional content. For other people, especially let's say you take a whole data center like Crystal, where you have this this culture that forms and it's baked in, like where role play is a part of that culture, and it's not necessarily the rating. If anybody's new to the game and doesn't understand, like there's various cultures. Some people define the Savage Raid as the true end game. Some people say it's glamour. Some people say it's role play. And that's actually a good strength of a game, that you have these different kind of cultures that build up. But for some people, they would argue that no, it's actually, this is a part of my end game. I want to open a shop. I want to come to Final Fantasy XIV and get a house so I can create my store or my cafe or what have you. I mean, and for them it is. And so when it is this restricted land grab, what people end up doing is resorting to bots. What people end up doing is breaking terms of service and hopefully not getting caught. Chris, what are your thoughts here?
So, I mean, one of the big things is we see it a lot in the comments on like guild guides, for example, of I wish I had enough guild to get a house. I wish I had the money to get a house. I wish I was able to make that. And what Brian's talking about here is really the core issue of the trouble it is to get a house, and why, as much as I would hope this would be a permanent solution, it won't be. No matter how small the server, eventually those 700 plots or whatever will fill, and then there will be new players, even on those smaller servers, that will want a house and can't get one. Having the money isn't the issue. I think Brian and I have both individually had the money for another house for quite a while now. I mean, I made the money for a small house almost every day for the first 2 weeks that the expansion dropped. The money is not hard to make, and that's not to downplay anybody who doesn't have the money. Go see guild guides either here or anywhere else. Getting that initial first several million is difficult, but once you have a few million, it's very easy to double it and then double it and then double it. And you quickly realize, if you aren't into constant glamoring, if you aren't into power leveling your crafts, which eventually you would have them all at cap, you quickly realize you don't actually need the amount of money that you're capable of making in this game, with the exception of housing. Housing is that one area that you can buy a huge house, you can decorate it with all this stuff, but money isn't the restriction. The thing that stops you from getting housing is that there isn't one available on my server. It doesn't matter where I want to live, the size. I could say I will live anywhere, in any size house. There just isn't one to purchase. I think that's really frustrating. I think seeing this news coming out will be this brief glimmer of hope, and then we will immediately see frustration all over again when that all sells out on day one on majority of the big servers.
Now, one of the cool things, though, that when we talk about the future is that when we have with patch 5.1 with the rebuilding of Ishgard, and then them teasing that at some point, not with 5.1, I want to keep hitting that. I'm sure there's somebody who thinks housing is coming with 5.1 for Ishgard. This is not that. Please, if you hear or talk to that individual, let them know, because expectations, when they get shattered, it's sad. Like, I always am like, I'm so sorry that, because I know how frustrating that can be. So, but with the rebuilding of Ishgard, ultimately, maybe this leads to, us getting housing, which they teased, which would be kind of mean. That would be real pulling the rug out from under our feet, which I don't think Yoshi P would want to do. He's a showman and a good one at that. So the nice thing, though, is that when you think when eventually we do get the rebuilding of Ishgard, and they do open up like Ishgard housing as a part of whatever that is, 5.4, 5.5, 6.0, whatever that ends up looking like, you could end up seeing like that's 21 new wards with just a massive amount of housing to be coming in the future, because as they expand the wards as a part of the current system, then they have that. The question, I guess, that if I was playing devil's advocate and I was sitting here, somebody who's watching this video, I say, like, why doesn't Square Enix just make 21? Why don't they make 221 or 321 wards? Why don't we just go and fix it with throwing servers at the problem?
We should probably pre-record this response to this and just drop it in the middle of every video, because it all comes down to the same core issue. Over and over, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Housing, battle systems, limited jobs, male Viera, it doesn't matter. Whatever we're talking about comes down to the code base that this game was built on. This game came out of the gate, and unlike, say, a World of Warcraft or a Destiny, it came out of the gate really rough. And now most games that come out of the gate rough, the reason we don't hear about long-term problems is they don't last long-term. They just die. And the exception to that rule is Final Fantasy XIV. So when we relaunch it 2.0, we take this shaky, crumbly foundation and we build a new game on top of it with just whatever resources will get it out the gate on time. And we say, God, I hope this works. And then it does. And like, now here we are, years and years later, and it's starting to show that we built a fast foundation on top of a crumbled one. And so you have all these technical issues that pop up. And so the way housing was implemented wasn't designed for the game to be played by a large player base. Like they just didn't even account for that level of success. And so it's not as easy as just adding wards. The next thing that people bring up is how come they don't just take houses away from people and make them free company only? Well, I mean, why do you think that is, Brian?
Well, I mean, how do you manage that? Like, how would you even go and begin to do that now? Ultimately, like, if you think hindsight being 2020, they would have never or should never have opened it up to individuals. They should have just had the apartment system. If they weren't going to do like instance housing, right? They should have just said, oh, and like, you want your own little apartment? Here you go. go nuts, have fun, etc. So that's kind of where that falls. And I thought I muted this. So.
And so they could just leave these free company long term. I think saying they'll open up to individuals later is really clever because effectively it doesn't, because they'll be sold out long before then.
Well, meaning like, later is like, oh, there's nothing available, but like, okay, eventually if somebody does sell the house, if they do like relinquish the land, that, okay, now an individual, like maybe by the time Ishgard housing shows up,
What if Ishgard was free company only, period?
See, that's in and of itself would be cool. Well, you're never going to make everybody happy because you have that individual who's like actively like, this is what they're already now. They've already been saving. They're like, okay, like for them, this news means nothing because they're not tempted to buy any of the current zones. They are stocking up as much gil as absolutely possible for whatever that theoretical date is, and they'll have their pick of the litter. Like that person who really wants housing and wants their pick of the litter is saving today. Like they've been doing that. They're going to keep doing it. Right. Okay, great. It's finally coming. That's where I want to live. Save. So that no matter what, whenever that day does drop, they're going to be on such a pile of gil that they're not going to have to sit here and worry. Oh, that got purchased. Okay, I'm just going to go into this one and I'm going to buy the first biggest one I see, etc. Like I'm getting a housing, then no one's going to stop me unless their internet goes out. And oh dear God, like that's where I would feel horrible for them. But that's where we'll also see that kind of frustration. It's so for me because housing isn't my currency. I'm glad we have one. We have a small house. I've never had the need like, oh, let's get a bigger house. I've never felt that need. And thank God. But if it was, like, I could see how people like get into it. And honestly, one of the things that you and I have talked about offline about the whole housing situation in of itself is like, I wish they would just fix it because I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of hearing about it at every open Q&A. I'm tired of hearing about it on the official forums. I'm tired of it because we've been hearing about it since its inception and since it became a problem. And really where I think it went from like a minor nuisance to like just a thing that like is so annoying that I just want them to fix it because I want these people, these players to really kind of enjoy the game the way that we do enjoy it, the way that they want to enjoy it. But ultimately when people have to start resorting to bots just to try and get a house because it's not happening for them, that's where it's like, okay, like there is actually a real problem here because now if you're actually trying to do it the right way, in a way you're doing it wrong because people are so hungry for this content, right? It is real hunger content. It's real driving content. And it might not be for, everybody and it doesn't, but there are people who really, really, really want this. And I want them to get their house.
As somebody who doesn't have a house, has the money and will not even try to be getting a house, at this point in my gaming experience, it doesn't interest me. Not to say it never will, but at this point, I would rather not have something that if I want to take a 30-day break from the game, I have to concern myself with whether or not I've checked my house recently enough or I lose it. That stresses me out. I'm not sure that I would make good enough use of it. So some part of me would feel like I was taking the spot of somebody who really wants that content. And it's just not something that interests me. Mm-hmm. But it is something that clearly interests the community because it and glamour, your glamour slots are like the two most commonly asked questions in any forum. Doesn't matter if they asked us to submit questions on the out on the forums or if it's somebody waiting in line at FanFest. The most common questions to show up in all stages of the game, whether it be for a 5.1 Q&A or a 5.5 Q&A, will be housing and glamour. Yeah. It's always housing and glamour. And I think that that's a sign that they do need to find a long-term fix to this. An expansion to the apartment system, something that maybe included the ability to farm.
And they've talked about as part of Shadowbringers farming, they kind of tease that. We haven't heard much about that, so I don't know if it's tied in to, with obviously the rebuilding of Ishgard. But that kind of transitions us to some really also more breaking news, if you guys aren't aware. Live Letter 55 is scheduled for October the 18th. And this is where they're going to show off 5.1 details part 2, which we're going to see some in-game stuff. We're going to see some raid stuff. We're going to see maybe some of the whole rebuilding of Ishgard housing stuff or more. And obviously they've got miscellaneous announcements. Chris, what kind of a miscellaneous announcements are you hoping for?
Do you hear that?
A little tick, tick, tick. I'm keeping it in. I'm not going to edit it out. Anyway, so what kind of miscellaneous announcements is Brian open for? Honestly, and this is I'm gonna beat the drum until I have to replace the drum. And I'm hoping that we start to see more console announcements. Google Stadia is dropping in November. PlayStation, Xbox can now play together. And that includes Destiny. That includes like heck, let's get some Minecraft finally going on crossplay on PlayStation. But regardless, it's like I'm always going to hope. Now, that'd be such an interesting time to kind of drop that news. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but it would be interesting to see. But yeah, part 2. This, for anybody who's not aware, ultimately this kind of soft confirms the 22nd as the as patch day. Namely because it is typically a couple days or sometimes like less than a week around that period, give or take. 1 or 2 things happening, but we'll get the trailer. We're going to get so much part of that content, which is going to be really exciting to see because I know a lot of people are, they are either have completed all the things they want to complete in the game, they're taking their break, they're playing another game like Destiny, WoW Classic, things like that, or more. But if you're still playing the game, even more news. If you guys didn't see our post, the Moogle Treasure Trove is back. This is a a huge event in which that they got tons and tons of items for you to go collect and gather by just doing different content. Oh yeah,
Orchestral Scrolls, you name it, it's in there. I think the 22nd is a really clever time to drive interest back to the game. I think with BlizzCon right around the corner, you naturally see both of these games always appearing to coincidentally posture. You always see one of them come out with like a patch right before the other one has big news. So, it could just be coincidence, but it always feels like each game is like, oh, you have an announcement? Oh, we have a major content patch the week or 2 before that. So hopefully this drives a lot of interest. If you guys have not seen Brian's video, you have a whole video out on the Moogle Treasure Trove, don't you?
I did. I put a video out, but with the with how YouTube's operating, and that it's like if it's anything less than 20 minutes, it's like we don't like you're not going to see it for some reason. So yeah, like that's where I was like, oh, we'll go ahead and cover it, let people know as a part of the kind of this general news update. And finally, the last bit of it is that if you guys have been wanting that Nimbus Cloud mount, they got more optional items in the store. My personal opinion is I don't not like these. I don't like stores and subscription games, but you know what? It's there. People want to buy it. Like there's a market for it, and so it's kind of like, well, I mean, that's why these things exist, and it leads into bigger conversations that are beyond probably the scope of this one video. Now let's talk about microtransactions in video games, but we'll keep doing that and going forward.
The housing controversy continues. That's really the center of the news today. It is exciting to see them always adding more wards. That is the natural trend. I don't see them making a major change to the ward system this expansion. It'll likely just be more wards. Guardian housing is intriguing to think about them earmarking parts of it for free company only.
Yeah.
Super intriguing to see them kind of making that. I know that that's going to concern some people, but I would just kind of set your expectations that they can and likely will set at least some portion of those wards aside based on this. That would be my guess, Brian, is they would say, hey, we're going to take the top half of the wards or something, but maybe they won't. Maybe it'll all just be a free for all day one.
I think unless they go and do some retooling, it just kind of is one of those things where, like, why did we not get a new dungeon or a new raid? Well, they've been retooling all these different things. So ultimately, you're going to have to balance it between new content and then also player satisfaction, ultimately. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully, if you guys are in the market for getting houses, that you're able to discover one and be able to acquire the house that you want. We're rooting for you. We really want this to be kind of an issue where all of us together can sit back and say, you remember when housing was was a problem? Yeah, that sucked. We're looking forward to where we could talk about going up the hill both ways in a snowstorm. Back in my day, I had to wait 10 hours, just to even have the opportunity to buy a house. Chris, you got any other final thoughts before we wrap up this video?
No. I'm excited to maybe get in, try some Moogle Treasure Trove. Getting ready for the live letter. Getting ready for BlizzCon.
Yeah.
Exciting time to be a gamer in and around and outside of Final Fantasy.
Hey, I got one question for you actually, because like I've seen it like while you were out in Scotland. A lot of questions like, hey, how's your warrior and your gunbreaker guides coming along? Because people were asking when we might try to expect those. Because I'm working on Red Mage and I hope to have that done here in about a week. So you've hit warrior and you're almost done with gunbreaker.
Almost done with the guide on Warrior. So I've been working on that. It's long. And then as soon as that one hits publish, I will start on the Gunbreaker guide.
All right, so guys, look forward to that. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, let us know in the comments below. You can always DM us as well on Twitter or in our Discord. Links are all in the description if you need it. For Work to Game, my name is Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you have a great day.
And we'll see you next time.